My name's Tyler Ford. I am Senior Director of Mentors with tnAchieves, and
My name's Ben Sterling. I'm excited to be here with Tyler today to do another edition of kicking off the mentor program and working with your students. And I'm excited to be here. And I've been with the team for 10 years and have either worked with the mentor program or our content and public relations side of our work throughout my career. And I'm really excited to be part of it again.
yeah, Ben is going to serve kind of as a great resource throughout today's webinar. He's been with our outreach team for longer than I have now, and is going to offer some excellent insight. We're trying something a little new during today's webinar. Both Ben and I, you'll see, are in the same room. So going to have a conversation about the mentor program, going to discuss what it's like to get started with students. And truth be told, this is always one of the favorite webinars that we do each year, because what this means is you've gotten your student list, you've attended your meeting, and now it's time to actually get to work when it comes to working with students. And so what we're going to do over the next half hour to 45 minutes is do a couple things. Talk through some communication best practices, do a bit of a Q&A with Ben. We're going to share about some mentor resources that are available to you to help find success in serving students and to make sure that you're serving as a great resource for them. And then we're going to address some mentor misconceptions head on. We're going to talk through some things that we often see can be challenges, can be points of concern. And we want to address those and make sure that as you get started with your student group, you're in a good spot and you're ready to hit the ground running. And of course, throughout today's session, we want to take your questions as well. So my colleague Baylor is on the line with us here today, and she is monitoring the chat. She's monitoring the Q&A for your questions. So post those there. She'll address those. And we will also take any recurring questions and address those for the audience. And we're also recording today's session as well. So if you have to hop out early or anything, we will send that out so you have that and can review anything you may miss later on. But with all of that said, all the housekeeping out of the way, I want to jump feet first into a conversation with Ben about mentoring and about some of these best practices that you'll find in your initial work with students. Just to catch everyone up, you should now have your student list or be within 1 week of receiving your student list. As you know, you attended your in-person meeting, watched that webinar. We've been sharing student lists weekly. And like I said, if you just had a meeting last week, you can expect to see that this week. And so now it's time to actually start reaching out and actually start connecting with students. And that's where I want to talk with Ben about what works well when it comes to communicating with students and how you can navigate your initial outreach. And one of the first things I want to ask you, Ben, is mentors are going to get a student list with a ton of contact information in it. It's going to have parent contact information, student contact information, and it might feel overwhelming. It might feel tricky to figure out where to start. What's your best recommendation there?
Yeah, so I know a lot of mentors that are participating with us this year are this is their first time to do it. And so that first student list email can be a little bit overwhelming. To your point, not only is there a lot of contact information and a lot of kind of details and demographic information about their student or students, there's a lot of words that come before that. So my first piece of advice to all mentors, if you're new or returning, is to read that email. It's a lot. It's a long email. There's a lot in there and a lot to unpack. But to me, taking the time to read the details that are in there will oftentimes answer the questions that you're probably going to have if you were to just scroll to the bottom and look at your students. We try to answer all those questions on the front end and provide as much like context and clarification about what you're going to find once you start getting into that student list. So first, read the email, go through all of the details first. But then as far as that action, getting involved with your students, I would say the first thing that I would do is reach out to the parents via email. So just send them an email that says, hey, I'm Ben Sterling. I'm your student's tnAchieves mentor. I recently attended a meeting at their high school, learned a lot about what the tnAchieves program looks like. And I'm really just here to be an encourager and somebody that's be involved in this college process. Not that you have to have confirmation from the parents to begin working with students, but it's always kind of a courtesy to go ahead and reach out to the parents first, introduce yourself, and then from there, begin reaching out to your students. Email, not always the best method to reach out to students with. You can start there if you'd like. I probably would start there just because I want to check that box. But as we'll probably get into in a bit, texting them is tends to be the most efficient way to get a hold of students. So start with reading the email, reach out to parents, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, and I want to highlight two things, and you touched on this, but you do not need to get a confirmation from the parents to start reaching out to your group. That is a best practice. We encourage you to keep students in the loop, or excuse me, keep parents in the loop. But if you don't hear back from the parent, that is okay. Start reaching out to their student because, you know, we want the students to get the information. We want to make sure you're communicating with them, and parents are, you know, information is provided to you so you can connect with them, but it is not a requirement as a mentor.
Yeah.
I think we kind of tiptoed up to this, but I do want to talk about that. They're going to get emails, going to get phone numbers. Should mentors rely on email or should they rely on texting or calling for that matter?
Yeah. This is always kind of the, it's always a question. It's always a concern. And to me, I wouldn't say one is always better than the other. You've got, to Tyler's point, you've got 3 ways to reach out to students: email, utilizing the email that they've provided, texting that cell phone number, or calling that cell phone number. Primarily, I'd say 80% of students would prefer to be contacted via text message. If there's one thing that I'm learning about our most recent generation of students, it's the easiest kind of shallow end of the pool, if you will, to reach out via text message. It's a lot easier to get off. It's a lot less intimidating to them to reach out and be communicating with mentors via text. But I do think that if you can begin to get to a point with your students where a phone call is even a possibility and they're able and willing to pick up the phone when you call, that is the sweet spot, because then it's easier to confirm if you're going to meet up with them later on, and we'll talk about what that means. But text messages are great, but as we talk about with our coaches on our staff, phone calls can be a lot more meaningful because you're actually conversing, and you're able to kind of escape the lack of context that often comes along with text messaging.
Well, and you know, I think that the ideal cadence that you would get into as a mentor is, you know, you're likely not going to be talking on the phone every week to your students.
Right.
But if you're having a phone conversation with them once a month, once every other month, even with periodic text check-ins, like you are knocking it out of the park, and you are, I can say this pretty confidently, building what will be an incredibly meaningful and impactful relationship. And so I think texting is to Ben's point, going to be your most reliable form of communication, your most dependable starting off, but hopefully you're able to get some phone calls in there.
Texting is also the most efficient way to communicate with your students. And we get a lot of questions about group texting versus individualized texting. And, you know, we've learned this as we've gone too. I wouldn't say that it's always been a perfect practice for us on our end, and even in terms of advice to mentors, that has changed. And the guidance has changed as we've learned over the years how best to communicate with students. I know there was a time where I would discourage group texting altogether. But I don't even know that that's necessarily bad anymore. It just, what I like to say to mentors now is when it comes to text messaging with your students, if you've got multiple, if you're going to send a group chat, that's a great way to get a reminder out. So if you're scheduling an event to meet up together at a coffee shop and you want everybody to meet together, it's a great way to send a reminder out about that. Or if you're reminding them about the FAFSA, it's a great way to just sort of do that routine maintenance of that relationship. But if you're looking for individual response or you're going to ask them a specific question, I encourage you to reach out to those students individually, because they are going to be more likely to respond with anything to an individualized text, where I've come to learn that they're less likely to respond in that group chat for that.
It's true. I always like to too, as we're having this conversation about what works best, make note too that you have their email addresses, and we are absolutely okay if you want to send them an email, particularly if you've got, you know, several things you want to touch on. It's too much for a text. Email's great.
An introduction is always good to start with an introduction in an email, because you can get way more out.
And my best practice there is always text the student and their parent and let them know, hey, I sent you an email. Because won't come as a surprise, 17 and 18-year-olds not great at checking their emails, but part of the work we have to do is get them in the habit of checking their emails because it'll set them up for success in college.
That's true.
Nothing wrong as a mentor with sending them an email and saying, "Hey, check your email."
Yeah, I was going to say, I know of mentors that's how they do it.
It is, I know.
They will, once they know they've got an accurate email for a student, which when you receive your student list, please know that whatever you receive from us this week or last week, that's what was reported to us by the student when they applied. And it's the most up-to-date contact information that we have. So that's not to say that it's right. Their email addresses can change. A lot of them provide their school email address and that kind of thing that they don't check, especially once they graduate. So we want them to utilize personal email addresses. We ask for that on the application and all of that. But once you know you've got a good email address, then you can start utilizing a little longer format communication, but always, to Tyler's point, follow up with a reminder about the email. That's the text is, hey, I emailed you this information. Go check that out and then come back to me if you have any questions or confirm the receipt of that kind of thing. But I know mentors, that's their full cadence as a mentor.
Yeah. I think, the takeaway here is you're the ones serving these students and you're getting to know them on a personal level. Ben and I can offer best practices, reach out bi-weekly, all these things, but you will get to know these students and what works best. And we want you to feel empowered to act on that in how you communicate with your group. Ben, I'm going to throw you a bit of a curveball here. Notice a lot of questions in the chat about what happens when a student isn't responding. Several mentors on the call have had students for a month or two now. And they may find that they've texted a couple times or emailed a couple times and still aren't hearing anything. What's your recommendation there?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. This is easily the most answered question in the Tennessee Achieves universe from mentors' perspective. We always hear that students can be hard to reach, and they're high schoolers. They are hard to get a hold of. They're hard for us to get a hold of. They're hard for their teachers to get a hold of. So if they were easy to get a hold of, they'd probably do all the things that we wanted them to do very quickly. So that's part of the challenge and the puzzle that is Tennessee Achieves. But I'll say there's a couple of things you can do. One, my first question to a mentor who is having a hard time getting a hold of their students is to lay out for me their methods. How have you been reaching out? Have you tried a text message? If you haven't, let's try that. Have you tried a phone call? If you haven't, try that. And that's once we've sort of tried everything in our toolbox and it's still not working. I give it a little bit of time, try again in a week, 10 days or so. If at the end of the day you have tried and tried and tried, say you've tried 3 or 4 times and you just aren't getting anything back from them, and that's including parents. I gotta always include that. If you've reached out to students and you're not getting anything and you've yet to reach out to their parents, I think try the parents too, because they are oftentimes the ones that will then sort of spur their student on to begin working with you. But if after all of those efforts have gone without a response, reach out to us and we're happy to also try to ping that student and say, hey, we've heard from your mentor that they haven't heard from you, and we can try to help facilitate that as well. So we want you to have a fruitful experience with Tennessee Achieves, and not hearing from your students and sort of reaching out to them to no avail is it kind of runs counter to the changes that we've made to the program this year. And we haven't really talked about that, but we changed the Tennessee Achieves mentoring model entirely for this season, because over the years we've heard from so many mentors that it's challenging to get a hold of students. And I think a lot of times that was because we were pairing students with mentors who had never asked for a mentor before, and it just wasn't something that they were interested in. So now all of the students that are paired with a mentor have said that they want to work with a mentor. And so to us, that should increase the likelihood that the students that you're working with are responsive and engaged in this process. So it is a bit disheartening for me to find that there are students that have said, I want to work with a mentor, but then aren't. So on our end, we want to do everything that we can to make this experience positive.
One thing I'll say there too, they are still 17 and 18-year-olds. And I think that for many, they put their hand up after their meeting and they say yes to wanting a mentor because they genuinely do want a mentor. But I think what's going to remain true is some of our students who have asked for a mentor, who are now paired with you, are still not going to reach out until the moment they need help.
That's fair.
Hopefully we're seeing that less and less this year. And I'll add, we want to hear from you as you get started to hear how this is going, because it is new. But if you reached out once a week ago, you reached out twice 2 weeks ago, whatever it is, still give it a little bit of time here. Because as we get deeper into FAFSA season, as we get more towards college enrollment next fall and high school graduation, I anticipate that many of these students will start connecting, and that's because they have the questions. They need the help. I think sometimes students just don't know what to do when kicking off, when they don't need any help and they can't figure out quite what they need.
Yeah, and one piece of advice that I could provide is when you are reaching out to your students, ask them of something that they kind of have to respond to. Like, have you filed your FAFSA? We're in a season, just to be frank with mentors, where the FAFSA is less known than it has been in previous years. I think the deadline is as well known, but the fact that the FAFSA has been in the news and has been redone, it's a new FAFSA, has a lot of students, we heard on a call recently, that has a lot of students sort of uneasy about filing the FAFSA, to be honest. And so as a mentor, not that you have to be a FAFSA expert at all. We're not expecting you at all to have even any prior knowledge about the FAFSA at all. This is a chance for you to be like, hey, this is a requirement for Tennessee Promise. This is something that you've got to do to go to college this fall. How can I help you file this FAFSA and get this requirement out of the way, and doing so inspire those students to continue on this post-secondary journey? I think this is a unique year for the mentors to be an encourager around the FAFSA, where in previous years it's been a little more straightforward from the Tennessee Achieves and high school and even the college's perspective. The FAFSA has been the same for 10 years, and it hadn't changed. The process hadn't changed. Now it's completely new for all of us. And so as a mentor, this is a great chance to sort of flex that encourager muscle, if you will, and be in that space with students. And with us, to be honest, we're all still trying to kind of figure it out.
It's a new process this year.
It's going to be great though. And from what we know, I will say this, I think I sounded kind of negative. The FAFSA, from what we understand from the students' perspective, once they do it, if they're willing to just do it, it's easier. It's better.
We just got to get them there.
Just got to get them logged in.
One more question for you here, Ben, and then I want to touch on a few mentor resources. Approachability has come up in the chat. How can mentors be approachable for students? And I think the broader question here is, should a mentor from day one be focusing on just the action items for Tennessee Promise and going to college? Or should a mentor feel okay to get to know the student on a broader level?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. This is mentoring, not
it's not transactional.
It's not a transactional relationship, and it's absolutely, I think, the most advantageous thing a mentor can do is to get to know the student outside of their Tennessee Promise or college expectations. I mentor students in other programs. I've participated with other programs. I've been on the staff at Tennessee Achieves for a decade. And I can tell you the only way I've ever earned the trust of a student is to get to know them in some other capacity other than the Tennessee Achieves expectations. If I go sit down at a table of students and I'm like, all right, what do you guys think about the FAFSA? They're not going to engage. But if I sit down and ask them about some current event or something in pop culture or something about food or just something completely unrelated to the college experience, it oftentimes breaks the ice and their guard will come down, and then it's a little easier to start building relationships. So I think approachability is being vulnerable in building those relationships. That's key. But also knowing that the more you can build that relationship, the more likely they're going to be to trust you. So this is certainly not just about understanding their college. We want you to know what that student wants to do about college, because that is, at the end of the day, the goal of Tennessee Achieves is to get more students to go to college. But we believe that the method to inspiring students to want to think about going to college is one of the secrets to that success is through positive adult relationships, having relationships with an encouraging adult in their community that is inspiring them to think about that college journey. And the only way to do that is to build those trusted relationships.
Yeah, I'll talk about you specifically for a minute. I watched Ben do this in real time, and I think this plays out in how you interact with your students. A couple months ago, we were at one of our meetings, and there was a breakout time, and I found Ben seated with a table of guys, and I think they were talking about the weekend's football game, but then that led to a conversation about what careers they were interested in. By the end, they were filling out the values assessment, which for a table full of guys is sometimes tricky. But it plays out well. And I think when you kind of lead by getting to know the student, you set yourself up for success.
Absolutely.
To have that conversation about college, career, and then beyond. So just to kind of jump in now, I want to have a brief conversation about some mentor resources and then address just a couple commonly asked questions and some things I've seen here in the chat. First of all, I've seen the question come up quite a bit in the comments about meeting your students, and that is absolutely the best next step. Now that you've been paired, one of our first recommendations is you carve out time to meet with them. And there's 3 ways you can do that. You can set up a coffee or lunch outing with your students, or dinner even. I think this is our best recommendation here. Find somewhere near the school, find somewhere that's convenient for the students, and go meet them for coffee or meet them for lunch. And just find a time that works well for both of you. Free food is always a great incentive to get students out if you're able.
But you're not expected to buy their food.
Yeah. And so that can be a good starting point. You can also reach out to our team. We're happy to reach out to the school and see if we can't coordinate an opportunity for you to go visit for lunch on campus one day.
I think that's the easiest way
I think so
to
too.
meet with your students. They're there, they're in the building, so it's not like you have to wait on them or hope they kind of show up, which how cool is it to meet with them at a local coffee shop? I think that's a really cool experience for the student because they get to do something a little different, but that requires them to sort of follow through, where if you go to the high school and we can coordinate with school counselor to facilitate something kind of during their lunch, that almost guarantees attendance. So there's some value.
Takes a little work off you.
Yeah.
And you can also meet virtually with them. I mean, I understand,
Sure.
I think meeting in person is preferred, to be totally transparent, but totally understand that for some students, meeting over Zoom or over FaceTime or having a call.
If you can do that, to me, there's a ton of value in both. If you can get an in-person meeting and you can sort of set the baseline there and then monthly hop on a Zoom check-in, and you're getting that face-to-face interaction, man, that is going to help carry that relationship so much further.
Well, and when you think about it, right, the student might be hesitant to have the in-person meeting to kick things off, but if you get them on a call or you get them talking over the phone, I do think that increases the likelihood that later in the spring or in the summer they do agree to meet at a Starbucks or something. So
but even just doing the Zoom interaction, to me, the students are just so familiar with that technology now. I remember when we first suggested this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, it was like a foreign language. But now it's just so
simple,
customary that we utilize that sort of technology that the students are oftentimes more advanced in how to utilize the virtual meeting technology than we are. So
it's true.
Encourage you to use that, and they may be able to help you set that meeting up.
Very true. The other thing I want to touch on here, well, broadly, meet with your students, right? And let us know how we can help you do that. You've got several tools in your toolkit here. And again, just to reiterate, as long as you're meeting your students in a public place, you're doing exactly what we would ask there. And let us know how we can help address any questions you have along the way there. 2 resources I really want to plug really quick before we address some FAQs here. First of all, your Monday emails. Every week, we're going to send you an email that is timely and relevant to the program at that given point. And what I mean by that is it's going to have an action item that outlines what you need to be doing at that given week to best support your students. We'll include text templates in there that you can copy and paste or type out to your group. And we will also include webinars and things like this in there. So look out for those Monday emails. And every Monday email also is going to contain a link to tnAchieves Connect. This is something we're going to introduce within the next 2 weeks. We'll have out to you, but that's your mentor portal where you can see in real time where your students stand in the process. So for things like community service, FAFSA filing, college preference, all of that is going to be outlined in real time in Connect. So that'll be included in each of those Monday emails, but be on the lookout for an introduction to that and kind of a guide to what that can do for you, because I'll tell you, that's something we've had for a couple years now, and I think it's one of the best resources that mentors have available, because it gives you truly like access to all the information you could need to effectively serve your students.
Yeah, I want to reiterate a couple things about that. Just from another edition of this that we hosted, there was a lot of questions about this once we brought it up. So to reiterate what Tyler said, the Tennessee Achieves Connect portal is included in every Monday email that you receive. It's at the bottom. There's a button that says access Tennessee Achieves Connect or something along those lines. That will take you to this portal that includes all of your students that you're assigned to for 2024. All of the information that's provided in your student list email that you're going to receive, and then any sort of pertinent updates that we think you need to know about in that season for Tennessee Achieves. So it is a sort of living, breathing portal that we can adjust throughout the spring and into the summer, and include information about your students that we think you need to know. So be checking that and utilize that as a resource. It, in my mind, is probably the most valuable resource you have as a Tennessee Achieves mentor, because it gives you a live update as far as how many community service hours they have in the system, what's their status on FAFSA, what college is listed on their FAFSA and their TSAC portal to send their financial aid to. These are oftentimes questions that students will ask a mentor, and it can be answered in Connect. So again, it's accessed in those Monday emails. We will host a webinar specifically about this portal, where you can hop on in a very similar format as this, where we can walk you through exactly how to access that and what it looks like inside of Connect. So just be on the lookout for that. But please let us know if you have any questions about it. But just wanted to reiterate, I know we had a ton of questions about it last time when we hosted this.
And on that note too, with questions, every week we host what we call mentor hours. This is essentially our open office hours style session where myself, Baylor, who's answering questions here today, is basically in a Zoom room for about a half hour each Wednesday, generally, to answer your questions. We don't have any content planned during times like that, but it's just a good chance to talk to our team face to face, get your questions answered, but also build a bit of community around mentorship. We always have a couple mentors in those calls who share best practices, share tips, and I'll tell you, those calls where we get a couple dozen mentors are always so great, because everyone's learning, and we're all, and truthfully for our team, it's a great chance to figure out how we can better serve you. So look for that information in your Monday email as well, because we'll share that schedule, and we'll let you know how you can join one of those mentor hours sessions. Now, as we kind of come closer to the end of our session here, I've got a couple misconceptions, couple questions that I want to address, and they've been popping up in the chat kind of conveniently enough.
Nice.
So works out well, I guess. We in a good spot. My first question has to do with the student list and where students are going to college. If mentors are working with a student who wants to go to a UT Chattanooga, Tennessee Tech, a school that isn't Tennessee Promise eligible, does that mean they stop working with that student?
It's my favorite question, honestly. It's a question that has come up so much over the last few years that it's caused Tennessee Achieves to completely reevaluate the way that we're messaging our work. Because I think for a long time, Tennessee Achieves had become just so synonymous with Tennessee Promise that people just assumed that our mission was to get students to go to Tennessee Promise eligible institutions, in most people's minds, very specifically community colleges. And obviously community colleges and Tennessee Promise provide amazing opportunities for students, but it's not the only opportunity or the only pathway available in Tennessee or in our country. And so we are trying to reshape the way that mentors think about this, and see their role as someone who is encouraging and inspiring students to pursue the best next step for them after high school. And for a lot of students, that is a 4-year college that doesn't fall under the Tennessee Promise umbrella. And that is absolutely fine with us. Again, to reiterate, we want students to pursue the best next step for them. What's the best high quality post secondary pathway available to them? So much so that we don't. The Tennessee Promise isn't the only scholarship that we actually manage and work with. We help the University of Tennessee system to introduce the UT Promise scholarship to students statewide, and that is a scholarship very similar to Tennessee Promise that allows qualifying students to attend UT campuses tuition and mandatory fee free. And so that is just one way and one example of how we're trying to encourage students to pursue colleges that are maybe not what people have always kind of assumed Tennessee Achieves was encouraging students to pursue. And as a mentor, we want you to work with students regardless of the institution. If you have a student that wants to go to Vanderbilt and I'll tell you a quick story. I can remember in 2016, I was hosting a mentor training in East Tennessee, and I overheard a mentor talking to another mentor where he was saying that the previous year he had discouraged a student from going to Vanderbilt on a full ride because it didn't fall into the Tennessee Promise umbrella. And I overheard and I interjected, and I was like, that student, that fortunately the student continued on their pathway to Vanderbilt and went on on a full ride. Right. Amazing. I'm glad they did that. But that is not the role of a mentor. The role of a mentor is to encourage students to find this best next step. And what does that look like? And obviously, for a student who's got a full ride to go to college, we want them to go there, even if it's the University of Alabama or Arkansas or wherever that is. If they've got a full ride or a great financial aid package that's in incentives to go to that institution, by all means. But also with that in mind, encouraging students who maybe don't have that, one thing that mentors have helped students in a lot of ways realize is that the schools that do fall under the Tennessee Promise umbrella, and Tennessee Promise providing an incredibly high quality post secondary route for students that maybe haven't even considered that as their option because they've always had it in their mind that they're going to fill in 4-year university because of family ties or historical just things that they've always thought. Like, I mean, I think if you'd asked me when I was an 8th grader where I was going to go to college, I would have said the University of Tennessee because I love the Vols. Yeah. But it wasn't in my pathway because that wasn't where I was going to go to college after high school. I went to a community college and used Tennessee Promise, Tennessee Achieves, and because that was the best next step for me. And so as a mentor, when you see that college listed there, note one, we want them to go where they want to go. Yeah. But also know that can probably change, and that college listed on their TSAC portal is most likely going to change.
That's right. That's a great point. When you get Connect, and there's a great question in here about, right now you just see their contact information. If you're in there, we're going to update it with the relevant student data for 2024 here within the next week or so and get that out to you. But you're going to find a college listed. That college is highly subject to change. Yeah. So if you find that a non-promise school is listed, if you find that a promise school is listed, don't let that influence too much how you connect with your students.
Well, right now they should probably all be Tennessee Promise institutions listed because we don't have their FAFSA data quite yet. So it's all Tennessee Promise institutions for now. And I think that is even going to make it even more likely to change once we receive their FAFSA data in a couple of months, and then we start to get a better picture of where that student intends to go to college in the fall.
But if they change their minds, that's okay. Work with them through that because to Ben's point, we want to help a student get to college.
This isn't a misconception on the sheet, but I do want to address this misconception that I hear. I think all too often I hear that it's too late for a student to. Why are you engaging in the student's college journey so late? And I would say that I'm not sure how this has progressed and gotten better over the years, but it has, and that a student can apply to most of these colleges that we work with now or even later from now and still successfully matriculate on into the fall enrollment. And so if you've got a student who is changing their mind in May, that's not too late. They can still do that. I mean, for 4-year colleges, oftentimes it is because they've got admissions requirements and deadlines that they have to meet. But when it comes to the community colleges and our technical colleges in Tennessee, you can pretty much apply up until the day before enrollment.
Yeah. Hopefully a little bit earlier.
You won't want that because it makes it much more challenging for the student to check all the boxes.
That's where mentorship's so important. We get it done a month,
but
2 months in advance.
It's not too late.
Yes, that's exactly
I like to reiterate that.
That's a great point. My final misconception, Ben, that I want to talk about here is for our mentors. We talked about the FAFSA, college enrollment, all these things, and we've talked about how students are going to go to a variety of colleges. What would you say to a mentor who's getting questions from students and they're thinking, I don't know the answer to this question. I don't know how to help this student. Maybe I'm not cut out for this.
If you are receiving questions that you don't know the answer to, you're like most mentors. That is okay. We don't have really any expectation that a mentor have prior knowledge of the college experience. Sure, if you have that experience and that knowledge on the front end, it's probably helpful to you. But I will say some of our best mentors are people that aren't from Tennessee. They are people that are maybe retired here from somewhere out of state, went to college a long time ago, but they're a great mentor because they are intentional and they're consistent in their communication. And when they get those questions, they know that they can reach out to us and we can help them get the answers to those questions. To be honest, Tyler and I get questions from mentors all the time that we don't know the answer to. And so it's the fact that, and I like to lay this out anytime I'm talking about the mentor program and try to give people like a 30,000 foot view of why the mentor program is important. At any given time, tnAchieves is working with about 90,000 students. 90,000 students with 49 people. The math just doesn't really add up, right? And the reason why we're able to support that many students at one time is because we've got a network of volunteers who are receiving these questions that they may not know the answer to, but they know who to get the answer from, which is us, right? If you get a question from a student that you don't know, you reach out to Tyler, Baylor, or I, or anybody else on our team, and we will then, if we know the answer, we'll give you the answer to that question and the link, the appropriate link to back that up and get you the stuff that you need to help that student. But in those cases where, and it's pretty often that we don't know, we're going to connect you with the person who can get that answer for you. Many times it's somebody at the institution that that student's attending that we need to get you in touch with, and we're more than happy to do that.
I think it's always important to remember when you get that question you don't know the answer to, when you get that weird financial aid situation, what we ask of our mentors every year is 3 things: be a task manager, a resource, and an encourager. Task manager, all about the dates, deadlines, making sure they're on track. But in this vein, being a resource is just as much having the answer for a student as it is saying, hey, I don't actually know the answer, but Ben at tnAchieves does, or Tyler at tnAchieves does. Let's get you in touch.
Connecting the dots.
Connect the dots. That's what you can do to serve students in those cases. And I never want a mentor to feel like they are not serving students well because they don't have all the answers. Well, like Ben said, we don't have all the answers. So please know that we're there for to connect you and serve as a resource.
You got to remember that a lot of times students are, if they're a first generation college student, and I can speak on this as a first generation college student who had parents who really wanted me to go to college, were encouraging about it, but my mom didn't know the difference between a FAFSA and a Volkswagen. Like those, she had no idea what that word meant, right? So it was just completely unaware of what the college access and college going process meant, or why it was important, or how to do it. So having somebody that is at least invested in helping me answer my questions made the total difference for me, because then I understood where to file the FAFSA, the fact that I needed to apply to college, that it was not the Tennessee Promise application, it was the college application. And these little nuances that I think a lot of people maybe even take for granted, having somebody that is invested and willing to answer those questions and help me find the answer to those questions made all the difference, because there wasn't someone at home for me that could answer those questions. If I had them, if I asked my mom, she'd say she didn't know.
Yeah.
And that was the end of that trail. Yeah. But if I ask a mentor and they're not going to say, I don't know. They're going to say, I'm not sure. Let me go find out.
Yeah.
That's a total difference maker.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think that's spot on. And I think that always keeping that sort of mindset in mind will help to propel you to success for your time as a mentor and for your students. We have had a lot of great questions in the chat.
And nice.
Yeah, I think quite honestly, we've addressed a lot of those over these past few minutes. We're coming up on time here. But I do want to say, I saw some questions too, great questions. But they might require a bit of digging from our team. So if you leave here and you didn't get your question answered, follow up with us.
Yeah.
I'm going to post my question or my email in the chat. Baylor will do the same. And we will be happy to dig into those questions, get those answered for you so you can support your students. But hopefully, you know now that we are there as a resource for you. We're going to be providing resources, and we want to make sure that through every step of this mentorship journey, you've got your questions answered and you've got a team ready to support you.
Yeah. Let us know what you think about this different webinar format. We came up here to do this webinar, and I was like, we've done the same format on these webinars since 2020 when we started doing this with this sort of technology. And it feels like we could do something a little different. So let us know if this is good. Is the audio good? Can you see us okay? Would you prefer for us to do it the other way? Like that, nothing's going to hurt our feelings. Like we just are genuinely curious if this format's a little bit more palatable when it comes to watching these webinars for 45 minutes.
Yeah, we decided to mix it up a little bit today. And hey, if you don't like it, that's okay.
Let us know
go
that
back
too.
to the old way.
We really appreciate y'all for joining us, taking the time to volunteer with our students. We simply could not do the work without you. So stay in touch with us. Shoot us an email if you have any other questions, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.